Hello everyone and welcome to AuditNet's Training Without Travel webinars. IDEA software training via practical application presented jointly by AuditNet and Richard Cascarino and Associates. Today's webinar is Advanced Report Importing. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm founder and owner of AuditNet and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today's presenter and subject matter expert is Richard Cascarino, Principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates. Let me have Richard introduce himself and give you a brief background overview, and then I'll cover the housekeeping items, disclaimer, and important information about the AuditNet IDEA partnership. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Welcome, and for those of you who are on the whole series, welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Richard Cascarino. I'm a principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates based out of Steamboat Springs in Colorado and out of Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm broadcasting to you tonight, my time, from South Africa. My background, I've got a 30 years experience in IT audit, and in IT and IT audit training and consultancy. I'm a past president of the Institute of Internal Auditors in South Africa, and I set up the African region for the IIA Inc. I'm also a member of ISACA, the ACFE, and the Denver chapter of the IIA. I have, for my sins, written a few books. You can see 3 of them on the screen. The Auditor's Guide to IT Auditing, Corporate Fraud and Internal Control Framework for Prevention, and Internal Auditing and Integrated Approach. That's my background, that's where I'm coming from. I'll hand you back to Jim and he can take you through some of the webinar housekeeping. Jim?
Thank you, Richard. Well, you all received the slides this morning, so I'm not going to read from the slides, but let me just mention that the webinar and its material are the property of AuditNet and Richard Cascarino. We are recording the webinar, and you will receive a copy of the recording with a link to access that recording. In addition, because we're operating under NASBA rules, we are required to ask polling questions during the webinar. CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all of the polling questions. If you're joining us from a tablet device or a laptop, you may not be able to answer the polling questions, in which case you should send copies of the responses to me or to Richard after the webinar is over. We'll record those responses in the required documentation so that you will receive your CPE. You will also receive your CPE certificates. They'll be sent out to you. We'll try to get them out to you by tomorrow. You can submit questions via the chat box. We'll answer them either during the webinar or at the conclusion of the webinar. I will be moderating that chat box and moderating the questions, and I'll pass them along to Richard. You will also have an opportunity to provide feedback after the webinar. The next slide provides some information about our disclaimer. Again, I am not going to read that slide, but basically you can review that at your own leisure. I would like to, however, mention about the AuditNet IDEA partnership. AuditNet has entered into an agreement to provide access to subscriber content to IDEA Premium supported users. If you are currently a Premium supported IDEA user, you can access the AuditNet content at no cost. For more information, please go to the AuditNet site for details on how to log in and access more than 2,300 templates. There's a slide at the end of today's presentation with supplemental information that actually gives you the link to the video and the explanation of how you can take advantage of the partnership with IDEA. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor back to Richard so that he can share with you his views and share with you his knowledge and experience so that you can get the most from IDEA software. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Before we actually start, there's a couple of people who have come in new, and I've had inquiries, emails from them saying they don't have the files. Now, the files were sent out as attachments on the emails. It may be that your firewall is blocking those files and dumping them into a folder for trash. So if you can have a look in those folders to see if they are sitting in there, and you should be able to retrieve them from there. Okay. If you're still having problems, I know that Jim is planning to contact you. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're picking up from where we left off with the previous audit report importing webinar that we ran on Tuesday. And today we're going to take a look at picking up values from previous records, using headers, footers and page breaks. We touched on it on Tuesday. We'll go into more depth on it now. We'll have a look at multi-line entries and multi-line field options and the use of pre-append and post-append layers. Critical area that came up in a couple of questions on the previous webinar was the use of floating traps. So we'll take a look at when you would use them and what you would use them for, and then we'll create our floating chaps, and we'll use exclude lines, and we'll take a look at using filters when you're importing information from printouts. Okay. As always, we're going to start up our idea, starting our programs, our idea, setting up our working folders, and then picking up our projects. Now, what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to start off looking at some slides and going through them with you before we move into the hands-on part using IDEA. When we're wanting to work with multiple pages, we're going to import our file using our import assistant and importing to IDEA from the print report in Adobe PDF, and we're going to pick up the one that we were using last time, Dave's Bookstore 5. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do it on your own, and then for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'll take you through how it's done. Okay, as we said before, to import anything, we start off in our Home tab and we look at our Desktop Plus. The type of file we're looking for is a print report in Adobe PDF. And we know that Dave's Bookstore is sitting in the directory called Tutorial. And there it is, Dave's Bookstore 5.txt. So I'm going to bring that one in again. And this is the file that we finished up using at the end of the last webinar. Okay. You'll see that we've got multiple different sort levels with account number information being up here, up at the top. Then we've got a whole pile of transaction lines. Each transaction we're going to bring in as a separate record. So that's where our baseline is going to be. Typically, not always, but typically, you're going to use your bulk data as being your base layer, the one that you're going to attach everything to. If I was attaching it just to the account layer, if I said that's my base layer, then I'm going to get one of these coming out for that. And on the second one, account 101, there's nothing in there. So I'm not going to get anything coming out. So I want to bring in my transactions, and the information about the account number is going to be then attached as an append layer. So I'm going to define all of these as layers within it. It will all end up on one record. So there'll be one record with the shipment date, the accounting, 1, 2, 3, the amount, the account number, the name, the company, etc. Then there'll be another record for accounting concepts with the ship date and the account number and so on. So I want one record for each of these to come into my database. I do not want one record for the company with that and the accounting 1, 2, 3, accounting concepts and basic accounting simply as different fields within it. I could do it that way, but if my next set of sales had 25 sales items, then I'm going to end up with some records which have got three fields across it and some with 25, with 23 of them being blank. So I'm going to take the raw data to start with. You can see that account number 100 has got one single date and 3 transactions. Account number 101 has got no transactions at all. And account number 102 has got 2 different dates with 2 different transactions. We can also see that the company name is blank on 102. We don't have a company name. What we've ended up with is a contact name where the company name should be and nothing in the contact name. Or possibly the company is called James Smith. I would have thought it would be James Smith and Company, but it could be James Smith. Just looking at the raw data, I cannot tell that that is a contact name and should be over there and that we're missing a company name. This could be an individual who's buying. So it's not a company at all, it's James Smith buying on his own account. Okay, so looking at the data, I cannot at this stage necessarily tell which are companies, which are individuals. All I know is that's what the data looks like. Now we do have some reports which are spanning multiple pages. So account number 102 has got the company name, James Smith, and the address spans over onto the next page. So I'm going to have to tell it we've got page breaks in between the first page, and I'm going to have to do that by telling it we have a header and we have a footer. Okay, and in doing that, I'm saying when it comes to this bit, jump over all of these. Not interested in those. Now that's fine, but a header and a footer are always associated with the page break, and they're identified by their position, how far they are away from a page break. So where would we start? We'd have to start off by defining something. Now we can't start off by defining our head layer because we've got to tie it to our base layer. Then we can define a header layer and a trailer layer for our footer. Now the footer ends where it says page break. Okay, so if I wanted those 3 lines, I would define those 3 lines before it, and then the 3 lines before every single page break will be classified as part of our footer and will not come into our database. Okay, you cannot start off by defining a header or footer. If I tried to define that, now all I did was swipe those and say yes, and I want to define this as a header. It's not going to let me. The header layer definition isn't there. The footer layer definition isn't there because I haven't defined the base layer. So I have to start with the base layer. I'll close that one down and cancel the layer. So where is my standard base layer? You start off with the data. There's the data I'm interested in. So I'm going to highlight one of those lines, the same as I did last time, and it asks me what do I want to create, a standard layer or a floating layer. I'm going to create my standard layer, and that's shoved it up to the top. Okay. Now you know it's a standard layer if all of this is running vertically. If it's not running vertically, then you're going to need to use a floating layer, and we'll deal with that later on in the webinar. So what I've done is I highlighted one and it's gone up into my field editor. That's my field data line, details line. And now I need to say, well, what is unique about that line that will distinguish it from everything else? For those of you who were here on Tuesday, that should have been a quick refresher, which means that I can use that as our first poll question. So I will launch our first poll. Okay. And the first poll says, headers and footers are defined using numeric traps, blank traps, no traps, non-blank traps. Please vote now. Once again, if you need NASBA certification, you have to answer them. You don't have to get it right, but you do have to answer. If you cannot answer, if it's a tablet that you're using, take a note of them, put them in one email, and send them through at the end. Okay, most people have voted, still a couple to come in. And we have 100% in. And I will share the results. And you can see that 50% of people have gone for no traps required for a header or a footer. Okay. Now for those of you who were here on Tuesday, good memory. For those of you who were not here on Tuesday, I did say that you cannot define a trap for a header or a footer. Okay, now we are in the base layer, so I can define a trap. What is a trap? A trap is something that allows me to define that this is a particular kind of line. So here is my line with my data on it, and I want to pick up something that's unique to that line. And the one that's unique in this line is going to be that dot, the decimal point. So if I go in to the line above my anchor editor and I put in a dot, you'll see that those three lines have all come out in blue. And if I go further down, you can see that those two lines have come out in blue as well. So that little dot has said anything with a dot in there is going to form part of this overall basic standard line. Okay, now I did it with a dot. I could have said if the field in here, let me take that dot out. I could have said if the field in here is, for example, numeric. Now if I put in an N, it's going to show up in red. And the reason it's going to show up in red is because nothing in here has got an N. N is simply saying look for an N in that field. I will take that N out. What I'm looking for is a numeric trap, and here they are over here. Text, numeric, space, or non-blank. If I put in numeric, it's picking those up again. But look what happens if I take that N out and put an N in the previous one. It's picked those up, but it's also picked up that date field because there's a numeric character in that position. So it thinks that this is going to be part of my baseline. So I need to get something that's unique to this line, and the unique one is going to be that dot, the decimal point. Okay, once I've got that, then I can start defining my data fields. And the way I do that is by going over and looking at the data that I'm interested in. I'll pick up the first field, which is that date, and between the yellow lines I'll click on the 0 and I'll drag it along. If you drag it too far, it's not a problem. You can pick it up with the double-headed arrow and slide it back one. And now, over on the right-hand side, you can see something that says Field Details. And this is where I will define what that looks like. This is what it's going to look like in my database when I import it. So, this is my first layer, and I'm going to put in my date. Now my date is going to be called, funnily enough, date. And it's going to be, well, it's not actually a character field, it's a date field. So if I click where it says character, I can go down and change that to a date field. Now that I've told it that it's a date field, I can tell it what the date looks like. I don't have to do that. I could leave that as a character field. But when it imports it into IDEA, I will not be able to do date manipulation on it from a date to a date, because it simply says this is a string of characters. It happens to be 05/01/2008, but it's just a string of characters. If I want to do date manipulation after I've defined it as character, I can do it, but I'm going to have to use some of my @ functions to create a field which is the date equivalent of that character field. So it's a lot easier to start off by saying this is going to be a date field, and the date mask, which is highlighted in blue, is going to be month / day / year. And once I've got that, then I can move to my next field. Okay. Now we've done this before, so we can simply pick this up and drag it along to the end of the field that we're interested in, and I'll take it along to somewhere about here. Have I dragged it far enough? Well, I've highlighted those. Let me have a look down below. Yep, it looks like I've got them all. But in actual fact, I'm too far to the left. So I can take one out there simply by going in, picking up my arrow and removing it. Or I can go over to where it says position offset. You can see it says 17. I'll make that 16. And it's moved it back. Okay. Now this is going to be called whatever you want, book title. It's a bookshop. And that's fine. I can then take my amount, which is up here, and I can highlight that, and I'm going to call it amount. It is numeric, it's got 2 decimal places, so I'm fairly happy with that. That looks to me like I might have it correct. In fact, I don't, but it looks as though it might be correct. So I'm going to say, yes, I'll save that layer. There's my layer defined. Did I get it right? Well, let me go and have a look. So I can go in and I can say I want to preview my database. And that's what it will, that's what it would look like, but look at record number 2, record number 3. I don't have any dates. Why? Because over here I didn't have any dates. So I need to change this. And the way I do that is by going into Layers and going into my Layer Manager, picking up the layer I'm interested in, which is my base layer, and say I want to edit it. Now the field I'm interested in is that one there, which is the date. You'll see over on the field details under attributes, there's an attribute that says blank cells leave blank. That's why I ended up with the zeros coming out. What I want to do is use the value from the previous record. And once I've done that, then I can say I'm happy. If I then look at what would come in if I brought the database in as it is now, is plugged those extra dates in where there were dates missing. So that layer I'm happy with. Okay. Now I want to define some other layers. I want to pick up that layer there with the account number and the name. Now at the moment I don't want all of the data that's in there. All I want is just that account number. And the thing that makes that bit unique is the fact that it has a colon in there. So it's highlighted that, it's highlighted that, it's highlighted that, and that's fine. So now I will pick up the account number, which is that 100. And I'll tell it this is going to be my account number. It is numeric. I'm happy with that. So that's fine. If I say tick that one now, it's picked up that, that and that. Now if I go and look at my data and do a preview on my database, here we have the date, the book, the title, the amount, and the number, and I've done it again. I don't have the numbers in because it plugged it in for the first one but not for the second or the third. So again I can go back into my layers and my layer manager, and now you'll see we have two layers. Layer 1 is the base layer, layer 2 is the second one I defined, which is the one with account. And I can say I want to edit that. And I can say there's my account number on the right, blank cells, use the value from the previous record. Okay. As far as the data lines are concerned, I could have just left that and then gone to define these, or I can go back into that layer, Layer Manager, and edit. I'm in the wrong layer. I'm in my base layer. So I can cancel what I'm doing and go back into my Layer Manager. I want to go into Layer 2 and edit it, because I didn't put in the rest of the data. So you can always go back and add in more data. I'm going to pick up the contact name, Ted Brown, and I'm going to call it contact. I don't want it called Ted Brown. That's going to be my contact. Once again, I'm going to say use the value from the previous record, otherwise I will only get that on the first of these. I will then say I want Brown and Associates, etc. I'll stretch that out because there may well be a few longer names. And that's going to be my customer name. It is character, I'm happy with that. Once again, I'm going to say use value from the previous record. You'll see that it says multi-line no. I'm going to say multi-line yes. And as soon as I did that, it picked up all of these. Okay. So now, using the little arrows at the end there, I can go in and pick up the second one of these. Those are all going to come out as the name, but you'll notice we haven't picked up that one past the page break. So I need to go back in. I'll save the layer as it is so far. And I need to go back in now and define my header and my trailer. So from the top down, I'm going to create a standard layer, and up here in the buttons you can see one of them is header layer. If I click on that, it will ignore all of the header layers on every page. Now I don't need to define a track to say look for something in this space. I've simply said anything that you find in those first lines is by definition a header, and always will be. I can also come down to the bottom and say pick up those lines at the bottom down to the page break. I'm going to define those as a footer layer and save that one. Okay, now if I go back and have a look at my layers on my layer manager, you'll see I've got a base layer, I've got layer 2, I've got a header layer, I've got a footer layer. If I look at my layer 2 now, there's my Brown and Associates. I can now pick up, but there's a problem. There's my header layer. Where's my footer layer gone? Well, remember what I said about a footer layer? A footer layer will continue to the page break. So what I needed to do on my footer layer I have a question. I don't have a question. What I needed to do on my footer layer was take it down and include that page break. So I will go back in to my layer manager, take the footer layer and delete the one I've defined. And I'll go back in. Whoops, I'm taking too many. And I'll pick it up, including the page break layer, or the page break indicator. And say that one is a footer. And now you see that it's highlighting the page break as being part of the footer. So now I should be able to pick up that Toronto, Canada, etc. Okay. I have a hand gone up. Is there a question? If there's a question, can you type it into the chat window? No? Okay. We have a question. Can I re-demonstrate the header layer? I'm not getting the green check to display. Okay, no problem. Let me go back in and delete it from mine. So I'll simply go into my layers, layer manager, pick up my header and delete. Okay. So it's all gone blank again. To get it, I'm simply taking it from the top of the page and pulling it down until after that from 5, 1, etc. I'm going to create a standard layer. So there's my standard layer. And up in the button bar, you'll see header, detail, etc. Now at the moment that green tick is not showing. The reason it's not showing is I've not defined a trap. If I put a trap in there and made a, I don't know, numeric trap or a space trap or any trap, that's not a valid trap in that area. Let's go into there and put in a numeric trap. Nope. Why not? Because I've not defined this properly. This is my header layer. When I click on that header layer, now I've got the green tick. Okay, so now I can save it. Okay, I obviously also want to bring in the telephone number associated with that person, so I can create another layer. I'll pick that up. I will know it's a telephone number because it will have a colon in that place. So it's picking up that one, and it'll pick up further down. So I'm happy with that. Now I just need to pick up the number, and I will call it my telephone number. Contact telephone or anything you want. Telephone number. I'm not going to do arithmetic with it, so I can leave it as a character field. Once again, I want that to appear on every single line, so I'm going to use the value from the previous record and give it a tick. If I go and look now at what my database looks like, always worthwhile when you're learning how to use this to go through and see what your database is going to look like. So we're sitting there, James Smith, Birchmount Road, Toronto, Canada, etc. So although this is only highlighting there, it's taken it all the way down to there. Okay. So now we've managed to pick everything up. We've got a footer layer, we've got a header layer. When we preview the data, it looks like what we want it to look like. So now I can go in and say I want to import this report straight into IDEA. And it tells me not until you save the template. You've put a lot of work into this, defining these things, shifting it around. You might want to do it again. Can I re-demonstrate the footer as well? Okay, no problem. Let me take out the footer layer that I've got. Layer, Layer Manager, Footer Layer, and I can delete it. Okay. You see we've got layers there. I could rename those layers anything I want to make it a bit more meaningful. For the purpose of this particular webinar, I'm just leaving it as Layer 1, Layer 2, Layer 3. So there's no footer layer. So now what I need to do is go in and define my footer layer. So I'll take it from here underneath the last one and take it down to where it says page break. I'm doing it on that page. I could do it on this page, but one way or the other I need to get it to a page break. Oops, I've taken too much. I've taken the last line of the address. I'll create that as a standard layer. You saw the first little box up here said header layer. The next one said detail layer. The third one is the footer layer. If I click on the footer layer, the selected lines will be ignored before each page break. And if I then look at the preview that database, I'm picking it all up correctly. So although it's not highlighted Toronto and Canada down here, it's picking it up correctly. Birchmount Road, Suite that, Canada, and so on. So now I can say File and import the report into IDEA. Now it's saying if you do this and proceed with the import and you do not save that template file, then if you want to go back and do it again, you're going to have to do everything again. If I say OK, it will ask what I want to call it. Now I've already got Dave's Bookstore 5, so I'll say yes, replace it. And it says, what do I want to call it? Well, I'm going to call it Dave's Bookstore 5. Do I wish to create field statistics? I could. I'll do them afterwards if I need them. So I'll say finish. And there's my database. Now you'll see that the customer is all one line. And the reason for that is because that's how I defined it. I defined it as one multiple level. I didn't need to. I could have defined that as line 1, that as line 2, that as line 3, that as line 4, whatever. Okay? It's as you wish to use it. For example, over here we have our telephone number. There's no point in having it over there. I want it over here beside the contact. I would rather have the books that were bought at the other end, so I can pick them up and move them over there. So there's my account, there's the contact, the telephone number, who the customer is, and what they bought. Okay. Now, the reason that we saved that template, if I delete that, Dave's Bookstore 5, after all this hard work, and I look at bringing it back in again. There's my Dave's Bookstore 5, the data file. I'll delete that. And next month I want to bring in next month's sales. So I can go back in, I'll go to Print Report, and I'll go to wherever next year's sales are. Presumably, instead of being Dave's Bookstore 5, they're going to be Dave's Bookstore 5 April. But I'm going to bring that one in. Now, if I bring it in as it is, I'm going to have to start the whole process again. If I look where it says Optional Template File, there's the template I created. And if I click on that, it will pick it up as I defined it and bring it all back in again. So this is next month's data with the same definitions that I used for this month's data. So where you're doing repeat audits and you're bringing it in from printouts or from printout files, you can bring it in that way. Now you've got a choice. If you have a printout, if you've actually been given a printout, then you can scan that in and bring in a 120 character printout as one single 120 character record, and it would look just as that one looked when we imported it. But for many organizations, when they are printing, you can turn around and say, look, can you send me the printout as a file? And they can send it to you as a PDF file, or as a text file, or as whatever type of file you want. And that just saves you scanning it back in again. Now, I said when we started that these layers are defined in the base layer. The base layers are the, let me bring it back in again. I won't save it and I won't bring it in the way I did before, but I'll simply bring it in from the tutorial and bring in Dave's Bookstore 5. Okay, there's my data Right? That's my base layer. Anything above it, such as the account number, etc., would be classed as a pre-append layer, so you're appending stuff before your data. If the blank cells are left blank, you only get the first one, so you would only get that one. These would not show up. And as I say, I showed you what it would look like if you brought it in with the blanks. So that's a pre-append layer, that's a post-append layer. For our purposes, they are simply layers. Okay, so moving back into my idea, that'll bring me rather nicely to my next question. I do like the questions. I get to relax and you do all the work. So let's go to question number 2. And question number 2 says, that with a multi-line entry in the field editor, one of the lines must be the anchor layer, the base layer, the header layer, or the footer layer. Remember when we took this one here, the customer name? We said, let's take that and make it multi-layer, multi-line entry, but there was something unique about one of them. What was it? What allowed us to look at that line or that set of lines uniquely? We'll give it another couple of minutes or a couple of seconds. Everyone's voted, so I'll close it and share the results. And we have a split between the anchor layer and the base layer. Okay, remember what I did? We had the base layer defined, and what we wanted to define was that layer with account, etc. By bringing that up, I had to tell it I'm going to anchor it on that colon. So the multi-line entry, the first line had a colon in it. It had to have it had to be the anchor line. Okay. We did have to have these defined, but they were not defined as part of this. Okay. Let me close that back down. And drop back into my idea. And let's take a look at floating traps. I keep doing that. Sorry. Oh, that's nice. I haven't seen that before. There's something I didn't know you could do in Windows. Isn't it amazing how you're learning all the time? One of the questions that was asked before was regarding floating traps. Now, a floating trap is something, funnily enough, that's used in a floating layer. And a floating layer is something that's used where it's not shown up in columns. Okay? All of these have been shown in columns, 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 columns. With a floating layer, it's not. So any trap defined within a floating layer, by definition, is a floating trap. And instead of looking at everything vertically, so it's looking at all of these book titles, etc. vertically, it's looking at them horizontally. So it looks at them across the way instead of vertically. Now there's one disadvantage to floating layers. You cannot have multi-line in a floating layer. So we'll take a look at how you would start off a floating layer. Okay. But before we do that, I'll hit you with another question just to make sure everyone's listening. And the question is, multi-line fields cannot be defined in the anchor line, cannot be defined in the standard layer, cannot be defined in a floating layer, can only be defined in a floating layer. See if anyone's still listening. Okay, I will close it and share the results. And what I just said was you cannot define a multi-line field in a floating layer. You can do it anywhere else, but not in a floating layer. Okay, so let me hide that and come back into IDEA. So let's take a look at how you would do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close down our Dave's Bookstore and we'll go into a different file. From our desktop we'll do a plus again. It's still a print report, and I'm going to go back into my tutorial again. But the one I'm looking for this time is one called access.txt. Ouch. That's what I'm now going to have to define. This is a log file of accesses. So up here we've got URLs, we've got dates and times, we've got instructions to get certain fields or certain areas, and it's coming from there, and it's coming via Mozilla 4 version 5 or version 4 using Windows NT version 5, whatever it happens to be. That's my log file, and I've been asked to do an analysis, which means I'm now going to have to analyze this lot. Okay, and you'll see there are no columns. There's a column there, but then it moves in. There's a column there, but then it moves out. So we can't do it the way we did. So the first thing we're going to do is take the first line and simply highlight it. But this time it's not a standard layer, it's a floating layer. So far so good. Because it's floating, now when I start defining traps, I'm going to end up with floating traps. You'll see there's a big crossed X, and I can define a floating trap. You'll see that we've got the data with the client host name, which is our 195.110.142.84, etc. We've got our date, our time, and so on and so forth. So every item has got a client host name followed by a space. So I could use a generic space trap. There's my space trap there, and it's highlighted everything because it says there's a space there. Now there isn't a space there, but remember I'm doing a floating trap, so it's saying everything up to that space. everything up to the first space, everything up to that space. Okay. Now, it has to be a floating trap. The space does not appear in a single column, but we'll have to make sure that we've got that floating trap button selected so that it's only going to pick that up. Okay. Happy. So if I take that out and I go back to that, I've got all of this lot. I could put a space in there, but first thing I have to do is create a floating trap and then put in my space trap, and then it will pick it all up. Now, how do you know whether you've got the space trap set on or not? If you look, that's got a box around it. If I took it off, it doesn't have a box around it. So it's not a floating trap. That's simply going to pick up those records which have a space there. Just the first ones until I get to there. So I need to make sure I've got that set on. And now I've got my space trap. Okay. As I said, if that's off, only the first set of lines are blue. First 9 set of lines are blue, so I want that thing on. And that brings us to our next polling question. And the next polling question is on floating traps. And it says, a floating trap not only anchors lines in the report, but also controls the attributes of a field, ensures that the longest field will be catered for, always ensures that a field will end when a space is encountered, or determines where a field can begin or end. Once again, you don't have to get it right, but you do have to get it. Why did I put it there? We have a couple more still to vote. I'll close and share. And the bulk of people said it determines where a field can begin and end. Remember what I did there? I said that's where that ends, regardless of whether it's on that line, or this line, or this line, or this line. Okay. It's after that lot there is a space. The first space that you come to is the end of that. So I've defined that floating trap. Okay. Happy. I'll hide that. We'll share it. As I said, that tells me that at the end of those numbers and dots there is a space. That is my trap. That's the end of that field, that's the end of that field, that's the end of that field, etc. Okay. Now, having said all of that, you'll find that a space between a field trap means that you don't have one trap, you've got two. There's HTTP, okay, colon, slash, slash. Now, if I put colon, slash, slash, colon, slash, slash, you'll see that that's highlighted, but this isn't, because that HTTP doesn't have a colon, slash, slash. If I put a space between them, so it's colon, space, slash, is picking them all up. Okay, so I've actually got two traps, one for the colon, one for the slash. The starting position of a field is to the right of the floating trap. The ending is the starting position of the field defined to the left is offset from it. So if I delete those two, and let's take a look at what we've got so far. Okay, I don't have anything. I can take that field up to there. It's a floating field, and you'll see it's in all kinds of different positions. But I'm not getting that one. Why am I not getting that one? Because I did it for that one. That was not the longest field. What I would need to do is go back and delete that one and put a space trap one further over. And it's not allowing me to do it because there isn't a space in there. So what is that telling you? It tells me that I need to go down and look for the longest one, that one, and create my floating layer from there. And there's my space trap. And it's a floating trap. And now if I pick up that field, it's picking them all up. So what is my first field? Well, my first field is my client hostname. So I'm just going to call it hostname. And that's giving me it with the offset, blank cells leave blank. Well, I will leave it blank in this case. My next one that I want is the date. So there's my date there. And I want the date to start from here, and it's going to end over here. So I'm going to start it with a colon, and it won't let me start it because I'm in the wrong place. I'm going to pick that up there. I'm still within my floating trap, so it's looking at the offset from that floating trap. I don't need to define any more traps in here. There's my date, and it's wobbling about all over the place as I go down. So there's my date. It is a date type. It says it's day / month / 4 years, which is correct. So I'm happy with that. My next field I want is the time, which is that 08 to the 32. So there's my time, which I will call, amazingly, time. Now you'll notice I'm not changing any of these blanks. I'm leaving them blank because each one of these lines is a record on its own, and I want it to be a separate record in the database. Next thing I want is my microseconds. And the next thing I want is the get HTTP 1 there. Now I have a problem because that's there, but this is over here. So what I need to do is take that and define a trap. So I'll put my quotations in. and I'll put my quotations in there. And it's picking those up, but it's not picking these up. So that's in the wrong place. If I delete that, I can come over here somewhere and define a quotation. And it's not going to let me do it. So how am I going to pick up these? Well, have a think. How are you going to do it? I'm going to have to take that and remove that one. I've got there. I'll take that out. Take out my field anchor. And take that out. Remove that field anchor. So I need that still selected, and I need to put my quotation mark over it. There it is there. It's still selected. I'll put my second one over it there. And now I can take that field and stretch it. Let me delete that one. I've got a question coming in. Can I go back so you can see the date mask? Okay, let me go back and show you how we do the date mask again. Okay, easiest way, let me just remove each one of these. I'll remove all the field anchors. Right. So what I've got is I've still got this highlighted. We'll pick up the first one, which was to there, and that was going to be my host name. The next one was the date. So if I simply pick it up from the 28th of October, just pick them all up. Okay. And that's going to be my date. Let's swipe that lot. And you can see it's automatically picked up the layout as day, day, month, 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 year, 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 year. Okay. Then I went and picked up my time, which I called time. Then I picked up the microseconds, which were going to be called microseconds. And then we came to this one. And I said, I need to keep that on, okay, with my floating trap on. And I'm going to pick up my request type. Let me take the second one out. I'm going to take that along to there, and I'm going to call it my request type. Okay, now I need to put a control over this one as well. Okay, and you can see it's bringing it down there, but these ones aren't coming in. And the reason these ones aren't coming in is because if you look at the display width and the actual width, the display width and the actual width are both 14. That's 14 characters long. But it's not. That could be anything up to 35 characters long. So I'll change that to 35. And now you can see what's happened. It's picked that up, it's picked that up, it's picked that up, it's picked that up. How do I know it's going to be 35 characters long? Because I've got the layout of the file in front of me. Where did I get it from? I got it from IT when I said, give me the log file, and I need to know the maximum length of the get and the maximum length that you can put into each one of those. Okay, I can pick up my 200 to 818, and it's going to pick up that. But note that's a character field. So in the second and third, you'll find that that quotation mark is being selected as part of it. So I don't want that. So what I can do is I can take my third quotations and put that in there, and that's dropped it out. Okay. But there could still be longer ones than that 200, 229. Okay. This is simply a number, so I'm going to call it number. But you can see there that some of them are small, some of them are big, some of them could be a lot bigger. I'm going to change the actual width to 100. And you can see that it's expanded slightly. It's taking me all the way up to that next quotation mark. Once again, I've got the definition of the line in front of me. Now comes my next biggie. So here's my URL. So my URL is going to start at that HTTP and go all the way along until it stops. But again, some of them are going to be in the right place, some of them are going to be in the wrong place. So again, I need to put mark over the second quotation mark. And it's gone all the way out to there. And it's plunked it in up to here. Anyone see a problem? Problem is it's in the wrong place. It should be here. Okay. And again, I'm going to change that actual field width out to 100. And I'm going to call that the URL. And now comes my next field, which is the bit that says Mozilla, etc. How am I going to do that? Well, once again, I'm going to put my quotation marks over the start of it. I'm going to drag it out to the end, put quotation marks over the end of it, and change that actual field length out to 100. If you're unsure, just make it a big number, okay? Because it will truncate it when it comes to the quotation mark anyway. So there's no big deal. And now I should have picked up everything that's supposed to be there. Have I? Well, let me go and look. How do we look? I can't preview the database. It won't let me preview the database. Why won't it let me preview the database? Because I haven't saved my layer. So I need to save that layer first. I can always go back in, remember, on my layer manager and edit that layer. And you can see there it's got the floating layer indicator on it. So now I can go in and lo and behold I can preview my database. And there's a whole pile in there. There's an error in here on that number for the first one. So I can look and see what that is. I can come down, take a look at the data as I go. There's a whole pile of errors under number. So let me go and have a look at my layers and have a look at number. Layer manager, pick up the base layer and edit it. And somewhere in here we had one that was called number. There it was there. Now what was wrong with number? Well, the problem with number was it should have been from there all the way to there. It's got to come off from the start, from immediately before that. And now, if I save it and preview my database, it's still giving me errors for my number. So what's wrong with my number? Well, at this stage, you're going to have to go back and look at the layout that you've been given, because it's possible that number is in the wrong place. So what have I got with number? Well, I've actually got, if I take that and move it back to there, and I take that and move it back to there, oops, move it to there, again, I've got an actual width of 7, which may be appropriate, or it may not. So I'm going to have to change that actual width out and put it out to, let's say 30. Well, no, let's say 50. I don't know what that is going to be, so I'll change it to 50. And now I will tick it and I will go and do my preview. I'm getting negatives. These ones are still not coming through correctly on that number. Why are they not coming through correctly? It can be something as basic as looking at number and seeing it is numeric, but hang on a second, there are spaces in there, so it can't be numeric, it has to be character. Now I can take that back because the offset is 66 and the display width is that. Let me go and try it now. And I will go and do my preview of my database. Oh look, there are my numbers. Okay. Never believe what the first person tells you, particularly if you're the one that put it together. Check it. Preview it before you're happy. When you're happy, then and only then are you in a position to say, okay, import it into IDEA, save the template. Okay, I'm going to save it as the template called Access. Bring it in, and there's all of my data. Now it wasn't in columns, now it is in columns. And now I can start working with it. And I can look at who's logging in when, where are they going to, etc. What technology are they using to log in from, and so on and so forth. Okay. And that's the advantage of those floating traps. But the trick is always, you've got to make sure that if it looks like numbers, is it numbers all the way? Because that isn't a number, that's a hyphen. That was showing up as minus 304. It's not minus 304, it's 304 to something. So that's an alpha field, it's a character field. And the fact that it looks like numbers doesn't make it numbers. Okay. So define the way the data the way it is, not the way that you wish to God they'd given it to you. You can always change it later on, and we'll look at that in a later webinar, how you can manipulate it. Okay. And that brings us to our next question. So I will launch that. A floating trap may be used to terminate a field in the report even though the actual width is longer, shorter, missing, or none of the above. Now remember what I did with it. We showed where the field ended in the first line, and then we went to the field length, and we said this field is actually, I shouldn't give you clues. Almost all done. Give me another 10 seconds. Remember, you don't have to get it right, you just have to do it. But it is nice for me if you get it right. Okay, remember what we did? We defined this and we said it ends there in the first line, but it could be one hell of a lot longer. So we can use that floating trap to say it stops here, but it could be longer. Okay. Let's take a look at using exclude lines. Okay. An exclude line we can use to exclude unwanted data where you cannot use a unique trap to select just that line while excluding unwanted line. Okay. Now, there's some restrictions in using it. You cannot use an exclude line before you've defined your base layer. So you've got to have your base layer, and then you can say, okay, exclude that one. Okay. So you can use, it cannot be used to a line that was a sample line for the base layer. So again, if I was going back in and picking that up, and you'll be glad to know I'm not going to go through and do it all again. If I go into there and pick up access again, I might want to exclude that layer for some reason. Maybe it's an invalid field. I cannot simply pick that up and say exclude it. First and foremost, I have to have a standard layer. Okay. Then I can play around with it. I've got a query. Quick poll is still on. Thank you so much. I'm glad someone is watching other than me. The problem is when you're using GoToWebinar, when it goes into the polls, it obscures the audience view, so I can't see what you see. And I've got to go and open that up, and then I'm going to go back and close it, and I'll lose it. So that's why I sometimes, that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Okay. So we've got our access one. Let's go and pick up another one that we can do some exclude lines on. Okay, so I'm going to close that one down, the access one, and I'll pick up a different file. And you're going to pick up a file that's a very common file that you would have to look at. So I'll go back into my tutorial one, and the file that I'm looking for is one called, funnily enough, balance sheet, ABC balance sheet. A favorite one for you to look at. Now it's looking at and it's trying to pick it up, because what I picked up was as a text file. If I want to do this, I'm still going to have to pick it up as a print report file. So if you're expecting to get a print, let me do it again. Let me go back in. The default when you start is that's on text. If you pick it up, the right file from the right place, and you want to do your analysis on it, and you're going to define all these things that are coming in, it's a text file coming in. Oh, it's looking at it and it thinks it's got a delimited file. Ah, I've done something wrong. Okay, so it's simply a question of going back in. Ah, that's what I did wrong. I defined it as a text file. It's a print file. So let me go back in, back into my tutorial. There's my ABC balance sheet. Ah, there it is. It's a print file. So now I can look at this thing and I can say, well, I need to define my standard layer. So there's my raw data. I'm going to pick that one up, and that's going to be my standard layer. Okay. Where am I going to put my field anchor? Well, that looks fairly good. A decimal point. I could use that decimal point as my field anchor. There we go. Now it's highlighted, it's highlighted all of my data, but it's also picked up my total. I don't want the total in. So I want that field anchor to define all of those layers, but not that line. And all I have to do is go across to the left-hand side and click. And I get a red X. And that says anything I do, any definitions I make now, will define these files, but not that one. I've excluded that line. Now I cannot go and exclude that line. If I try and exclude that one, it says I can't do it, because that is the line that I'm using to define my base layer. I can't do it to a line in which an append layer field is defined. Okay, so if I'm saying I'm going to make that an append layer, I can't then exclude that one. Okay. So there's some limitations in what you can do. If I've already excluded that with a filter, then I can't exclude it again. But that's a useful one for excluding it. So what have we got? Let's pick up our data line as a standard line. First one we've got is our account name, which is 20 characters long. Oops. So it's going to be coming over here somewhere. And I've only got 18, so I could go down here and simply make that 20. Okay, how do I know? Because again, I've got the file layout in front of me. It's on slide 43 for you. Okay, so there's my first one, and that is not going to be called E. That is going to be called my account name. Can you see this is starting to get very basic and boring? My next line could be from there, it could be from further over, I don't know. So I'll take it over a little bit further. And that one I know is going to be my opening balance. Opening balance. I'm looking at it, offset 21, so starting in position 21. Actual width 11. It should be 1 character longer, because that is telling me it's a debit or a credit. So I need to pull that further over. There's my 12 characters. It is numeric. It's got 2 decimal places. I'm happy. My next field is in the middle. Now I don't have anything in there, but nevertheless I'm going to have to define it, because starting immediately thereafter is my debits. Which should be correct, because there's my D and there's my debits, and there's my D and there's my debits. These are credits. Okay, so I'm happy with that one. My next ones are my credits, so they're going to be in there. Numeric, 2 decimal places, 11 characters long. No, actually 12 characters long. There's my balance. Now I've pushed that too far over, so I'll pull it over 1. Sitting 12 characters long. And finally my closing balance, which is over here. Which is going to be closing balance. And from there on, I'm in good fettle. Now, I could turn round and say down here, filters. Okay? If I say I want to include or exclude, I can add a filter to include or exclude, but it's going to exclude all or include all. So I want to include the records with the following data, and I could add in that I want debits only or credits only or revenue food only or whatever. Okay, so I could say I want to say revenue food. And I can say I want to include the records with that or exclude it. So I'll exclude with that. Okay, so you enter the exact content with spaces and all the rest of it of what you want to exclude, and it will exclude all occurrences of that. So if I said exclude revenue, okay, then all of these ones with revenue would disappear. That exclude only excludes that single line. Okay, so that works at the level of the line. The filter works at the level of the field. Okay, I'm in closing balance, so putting that in wouldn't help. I would have to go into here and then say, okay, exclude all account names revenue food or revenue. Okay, happy. So I will tick that. I'm not going to bother putting in the accounting balance and all the rest of it. I could leave that off, and you'll see that's come back in, and I could now say I want to exclude anything where the account name is ledger total. Okay, So if I go back in on this thing, go into Layer Manager and edit it, now my ledger total is showing up. If I click on that field, there's my account name, I can now say I want to go in there, add a filter, and I'm going to exclude any records with ledger total. Okay. It's not excluded it. Why? Because I didn't add it. Once again, if you find that it's not doing what I think I'm doing, go back and look what you just did, and you probably made a mistake. So I'm going to put my ledger total, and add that as one to be excluded. Okay. Now it's still showing on here, but if I go in, well, first and foremost I'm going to have to save that. If I go in and look at the data, preview the database, I've got everything down to overtime. I do not have ledger total. Okay, ledger total shows up here because it is a defined part of my account name. But I've got a filter in that says take off ledger total on any line, and you can see there it now says layer 1 base layer with field filtered. Filtered field is account name, and if I click on that, you can see the effect of the filter. It's taken that out. I can of course go back into my layer manager, pick up that one and edit it, and go back into my account name and take that ledger total and delete that from the filtration, and it's back in. Okay. So let me not save that. So I'll leave it with that filtered out. I'll exit the layer without saving any changes. I'll look at my database. Looks to be what I want. The opening balances, I've got errors. Okay. Why have I got errors in opening balances? Well, if I look at my opening balances and I go in on my layer manager and edit it, you'll see that I'm starting with an offset of 21, and guess what? I've got a C and a D. Now you can't have a C and a D in a numeric field, so what I'm going to do is take that back. That's a credit, but I know that's a credit because it's coming up there. I'm going to have the same problem here. I'll take that C off of it. Pick up that one and move the C. Pick up that one and move the C. And if I want to show that, I can show it separately as debit or credit. As a character field. Oops, deb, credit. DR or CR. When I'm happy with that, I'll give that the tick, but it doesn't like it because it doesn't like that slash. You can't have that in the name. So let me go back into my layer manager. It's taken it out there, it's taken it out there. Here is my DRCR, and you'll, whoops. Here is my DRCR, and you'll see it's showing it as C. D or C or D. That it will accept. Now if I look at previewing my database, there's the opening balance, there's the debits, there's the credits, there's the balance, there's the closing balance, and if I come further over it shows me whether it's a debit or in debit or credit. Okay, when I'm happy with all of that lot, once again I can say import the report. Now I'll stop it there. You can of course say I want to save template as, or simply say save template. And then when you say import the report into data, into IDEA rather, it will bring it straight in and not prompt you to save it again. Okay, and that brings us to our final question. I'll launch the final question. An exclude line can only be used before the baseline has been defined. In a line that was selected for the sample line, to exclude a line already being excluded in the filter, or none of the above. Remember what we're thinking about, the red X at the side of the line. When can you put that in? What kind of line can you put that into? I've got everyone scratching their head now. Did we use it in that one or didn't we use it in that one? I thought we did, no, maybe we didn't. It's not a trick question, but it does catch you out. I hate doing exams when there's an all of the above or a none of the above. Give it another couple of seconds and then we'll close it. Everyone's voted. And the correct answer is none of the above. Okay. Remember, that single exclude line, you can't use it before the baseline layer has been defined. You can't use it to exclude the line that you picked to be the sample for the base layer, the first line. And you can't use it to exclude a line that's already been excluded in the filter. So the answer is none of the above. Okay. Having said all of that, that brings us rather neatly to the bit that says any questions? No questions at your end?
I don't see any questions.
Does that mean everyone has memorized everything? Aha, here they come. Oh no, thank you.
Another helpful presentation. It's always nice to get positive feedback.
Yep. That tells me either you've enjoyed it or you fell asleep.
No, I think that
I hope that you enjoyed it.
I think you've provided some great information, Richard, and I think that everybody has gotten a lot of useful information out of today's session. I will remind everyone the next slide has the remaining schedule. We have a webinar next Tuesday. If you go to that next slide.
Yep. I'm just replying to one person who came in with a question. The next slide. I take it that's the one you were looking for?
There we go. Using statistics and IDEA, that's next Tuesday, followed by continuous monitoring using advanced statistical analysis. And then we start getting into scripting. So those of you that have signed up for the entire series, we look forward to welcoming you back. And those of you that haven't signed up, you still have an opportunity to do so on the AuditNet site. The next slide provides you with some supplemental information that we have on AuditNet. I will remind you again that the introduction to AuditNet for IDEA users, the video is out there. The video was put together by Automation in Houston, Texas, and basically it has great information from Don Sparks on how you can take advantage of the agreement between AuditNet and Caseware IDEA. There's also some information there from Dave Kader, as well as links to the data analysis software vendors, ACL, IDEA, and Arbutus. And then there's some documents that are available from AuditNet. Again, if you are a Caseware IDEA user, you have access to these documents. You can download them from the AuditNet site. And with that, I will, if there are no additional questions, I will remind you that we will be sending out the CPE certificates. You will receive the recording. If you attended Tuesday's session, you'll receive the recording today. We were a little late in getting that uploaded, but you should get that today, and then you will get the link to the recording from today's session tomorrow. So again, thank you, Richard. I wish everybody
welcome.
I wish everybody a great day and a good weekend, and hopefully you're in an area where you've got pleasant weather today. I'm looking out right now, and we are getting about 6 to 8 inches of snow here in Washington, D.C. Hopefully where you are is more in tune with Richard's weather down in Johannesburg. I would imagine it's...
Well, we're on 30, but it's 30 centigrade.
30 Celsius.
Which puts us about 90. Yeah.
30 Celsius. So 90 degrees. Okay, well, we're at opposite extremes here. So
but I'll be back in the snow in 2 weeks' time.
All right, well, everybody, have a great day, and thanks again for attending. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And as always, if you have any queries that you come across later on, the contact detail is in there, either for Jim or for myself. If you've got a query on AuditNet, Jim's the man. If you've got a query on the content of this, drop me an email and we'll pick it up from there.
Also, if you have any questions in regards to how to use IDEA, you do have the help desk that's available to you, which is a great resource. I've used the help desk at Automation on a number of occasions, and they will walk you through solutions for specific problems that you might have. The other thing I will mention to you, I think as long as we've got a few minutes here, is that the value of using data analytics is truly in taking what you've learned and applying it, and applying it right away. Don't wait. In other words, take what you've learned here, figure out how you can use it on current projects and also projects that are in the plan, and start using it, because if you don't use it, Richard will confirm this, you lose it. So basically you really have to start using the tools, and there are other tools that are out there. We have other training that's available on Excel, and those kinds of tools are great for quick analysis. So if you want to do something that's really quick with Excel, there's some tools out there, and we're providing training on that as well. So again, thank you for attending today.
The one thing,
go ahead,
if I may add on that, Jim.
Sure.
It's one of the strengths of using the AuditNet webinars is when you get those the videos and you download the videos, if it's 3 months before you actually go to use IDEA, you'll have lost so much, but you can always bring up that video, replay it, and that was it, I remember it now, and then you can go and use it.
Exactly, and what we're doing,
that's the strength of the webinars.
What we're doing to support that is that the webinars, the recordings to the webinars are only available for a limited amount of time on GoToWebinar.
Yep.
But we are re-recording them, and we will upload them to auditnet.tv so that you will have those for an extended period of time. I see that Christopher just posted a question. Are the videos available for download or just for streaming? They are just for streaming via the GoToWebinar site, but we are going to be uploading those to auditnet.tv, and those should be available for download. So you will have these available for you for your viewing again and again and refreshing.
You always have the slides.
You always
have the slides.
You always have
the raw data files.
Exactly. So you've got all the information there, but please use it. We're trying to encourage all auditors to basically move the bar on the data analytics and the technology maturity curve for auditors. So you can become what we call an influencer or a champion in your organization, and really share the information with the other staff and show them the value of data analytics, because once you start showing everybody the value of it, and you also take that and you use it for the audits that you're working on, Richard has said this many times before, but management will come back to you and they'll say, how did you do that? What tool did you use to do that? And that's when you know that you've made a real progress, because then you are an influencer, because you're getting management to see the value of using data analytics.
Over and above the data analytics side, just a plug for the other series that Jim has coming up. Starting on the 28th of April, there's 2 series of IT auditing and advanced IT auditing, which for your sins I run, and that would be more suitable for an introductory level. The first series for new IT auditors, and the second series for more advanced IT auditors. But it's not CATS, it's generic IT auditing.
Great.
Available also on AuditNet.
Great information, and great training, and again, we try to keep the cost of these sessions low so that more auditors can attend. And again, those if you have a whole entire staff that you need to sign up, we have great pricing for groups as well. So thank you all for attending, and again, have a great day. Bye.
Bye, guys.